What up, Internet? Can you remember a time you felt where you felt seen and understood in a way that almost had a comforting quality to it? This is a question I often ask clients when reviewing their attachment history. My name's Daniel. I'm a therapist by day and hobby baker by a different time of day. And today we're making bagels and talking attachment. Attachment research says that our most basic fundamental survival strategy is to find a way to belong and connect with others. Longing for the sense of connection and belonging is our most basic primary need, especially when we feel threatened. Because of this, a sense of emotional isolation is inherently traumatizing. In other words, not knowing that I matter to someone. Now, when we do feel threatened, the human brain takes resources into account, such as how are you feeling in that moment, what's happening, are you alone or are you with someone else? A researcher named Prophet conducted a series of studies about estimating the size of a hill when standing in front of it. And participants in his study had to estimate the size of the hill standing there alone, standing there with a friend, standing there with 50 pounds of rocks in a backpack, standing there with 50 pounds of rocks in a backpack with a friend. And what he found was that with a friend on either way, these people estimated that the hill was smaller than if they were standing there alone. Attachment research says that the more connected you are, securely, the more separate and autonomous you can be. So when most people think about attachment, maybe they've heard of attachment styles or attachment patterns. And we'll get to that in a minute, the secure and the different types of insecure attachment styles. That comes with the question, what is a secure attachment relationship? The most common acronym I use to help describe this to clients is ARE. Accessible, responsive, and emotionally engaged. And so that question is of are you there for me? ARE. When the going gets tough, when things get hard, are you there for me? When these three characteristics are present from an attachment figure, at least most of the time, those are qualities and characteristics of a secure attachment figure. So the secure connection creates the sense of a secure base or a safe haven. This secure base or safe haven can become internalized, where we carry the strength or the resource of this relationship with us, even if we're not in direct proximity, physical proximity to that person. So it creates competence and confidence with this internalized sense of self and other. Now, in times when we don't have the connection with others or with our own sense of a strong, competent self, we can go into separation distress. So when we're disconnected, separation distress is primed and can look like protesting, clinging, despair, or even detaching. Now, none of these are dysfunctional responses in and of themselves, but this separation distress is natural. How you deal with it can become habitual. These are protection strategies that can eventually lead to negative ways of managing and coping with difficulties and hard emotions. Our sense of ability to deal with vulnerabilities start to narrow down, and we can get stuck or imprisoned by these strategies that are no longer serving us. So before we get into the different attachment patterns or attachment styles, I want to say they're also not just about behaviors, but the rules that we learned in previous relationships about what we can and can't know in the context of that relationship, whether that be how the other person's feeling, or what they're thinking. Rules about what we can and can't feel, or what emotions can and can't be understood, or whether we're allowed to be curious about them. So the secure attachment style can come from those three characteristics I talked about, and also from a caregiver or romantic partner that we find to be predictably responsive. Of the insecure attachment styles, we talk about an anxious attachment style, which is often there's a fight response or a hyper-arousal, a sense of high needs, a sense of I need to be vigilant and look for any ways that we might be disconnected or might be heading that way. There's high anxiety. These people are often demanding of attention and connection, but never really feeling seen or heard. So the anxious attachment pattern or style often comes from someone who is more unpredictably responsive. The insecure avoidant is more associated with a freeze or even a flee response, more of a hypoarousal, a tendency to minimize their own needs, minimize their needs for connection. There's often a sense of feeling lost because it's hard to even know what you need or how to connect with others or how to connect with yourself. And the avoidant strategy often comes from caregivers or people in relationship that are predictably unresponsive. We know that they're not going to respond, so we don't go for connection. And again, a protective strategy, but after a time, we forget how to seek out and how to receive that sense of connection. And lastly, the fearful avoidant strategy. In this one, you tend to flip between an avoidant and an anxious strategy. Typically, this is due to trauma, and others can become a source of fear. Unresolved, traumatizing responses from a caregiver or from a romantic partner can lead to this flipping back and forth between anxiously wanting and protesting or clinging for or needing the attachment and avoiding it or minimizing the need for connection. And the good news is that models or patterns are fluid and changeable. In one study, 22% of couples changed their attachment styles between a period of 3 months before they were married and 18 months after they were married. So attachment styles can be changed within a relational context, typically with a spouse or working with a good therapist who understands attachment, but it does take some work. So I'll just leave you with this question to ponder. Who was your ARE person, if anyone? If there was a time when you were a child and you needed a sense of connection or support or just comfort, who would you go to? And how did you go about receiving that sense of comfort? Did you seek it out, or did they kind of call it out of you? And if no one was there to offer that comfort, how did you learn that? Do you have a specific memory where you sought it out and were rejected, or nobody was there, maybe physically out of town or emotionally unavailable? And as you look at your relationships now as an adult, are there any similar patterns? Do you see yourself as unable to reach out for the connection or receive it? One thing to mention is these attachment styles or the internal working model for what relationships are, or sense of self and sense of other. These form pre-verbally, in the pre-verbal time of life. So some of it you may not cognitively or explicitly remember. And some things can be hard to confirm, but reprocessing certain moments of disconnect, even if that means hypothetically thinking about what experiences you may have gone through, whether that be a tendency to avoid or dismiss a need for connection because maybe I was allowed to cry a lot with no response as a baby. My nervous system or my attachment system learned in that pre-verbal stage to diminish or ignore the need for connection. Trying to make sense of these things can help you be more aware in the moment when you're dismissing or avoiding connection, or more aware in the moment when maybe you need connection. Thanks for watching. I'll see you next time.